man, I uh
Yeah, tell me where
okay.
you're coming from. Where are
I,
we entering? Where are we entering the tale of Meredith today?
let's enter where are we entering the tale of Mary today? I am in the middle of a rheumatoid arthritis flare.
Oh
Um
no! Oh my God! I'm sorry to hear that.
so yeah, it sucks. I'm in quite not a crazy huge amount of pain, but I was yesterday.
Hmm.
All I want to do is sleep. I've been sleeping for like all of yesterday and all of the like day before that.
Yeah.
I took a nap before I started recording, and I definitely was almost like, "Fuck this podcast. I should just keep sleeping. Fuck this." Um, like, fuck this whole thing. Like, why am I even bothering? Like, I want to sleep. It's more alluring than heroin. Like, that's all I want to do. Um,
Yeah.
there's that. Um, I will say the other place that we're entering is a really good place because if you listened to last week's episode, which was about Stardust. Uh,
Ostensibly.
so, what I'd like to say about our episode of Stardust is that,
I really feel like it's your episode of Stardust.
you know,
Continue.
that
It's my episode of Stardust and your episode of Mental Breakdown.
the
Heat
I-
stroke.
it was sort of a live audio portrayal of someone descending into a heat stroke fueled psychosis.
Uh-huh.
And the human body kind of has like an optimal temperature range at which it can exist. And during last week's recording, it was about 95 degrees here in Richmond. And it was about 101 degrees in my office. And I don't
Suffice to say, you didn't have the coolest head.
I had not the coolest head, and I will be fully honest, I barely remember that recording. Um, I don't remember what we talked about.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the points that we brought up. I don't
Uh-huh.
remember any aspect of that recording is gone.
It
Uh,
was it was
because it was
um
never it to me, it never happened, it was and remains a fever dream. So, I want to apologize for everything I did and didn't say.
mhm.
I wanna just go ahead and, if there were things about it that were funny, that's amazing. If there were things about it that were upsetting, that just is what it is. It exists as a moment in time. I have since bought an air conditioner for my
Woo!
office purely because I was like, I I had been working like that at my job that pays me money.
I'm impressed. And you didn't use any of that money to make the job easier on yourself in that regard.
What I realized after our recording that I don't remember, once I woke up from sleeping downstairs on the floor because it was the coolest place in my home.
After crawling under the foundation of my home to get some relief from the hell-like inferno inside my home.
What I realized is that if I did not work in my home and I worked in an office building and I was required to work in an office that was the temperature that my home office is, it would be a fucking OSHA violation.
That's
Um,
right.
and
That's correct.
so that day after we recorded, and again, after I had slept for probably 3 hours on the floor to cool down, I, went and spent many dollars on an air conditioning unit, and my life is improved, I would say fairly immeasurably,
Mhm.
by an exponential factor. So I'll just this is a long-winded way of saying If our Stardust episode isn't your favorite, guess what? It wasn't my favorite either, but I have no way of knowing because, again, I don't fucking remember it. That's it.
It's a lot of you agreeing with points that I make. It's a lot of you saying, "Yes, yes, Robert De Niro. Yes, he's great. Yes, the dress, it's great. It's fine. Yes, you're right. Yes." And, yeah. And for my part, as a person who does who doesn't who also doesn't do well in the heat or the
I
humidity,
Yeah, it's
I
bad.
I I noticed, I recognized your inherent the verge to which you were on heat stroke.
Yes.
the I recognized that you were close to a mental breakdown because the heat was just oppressing your entire body. Um, and instead of extending an empathetic hand, I chose violence. I chose violence.
You really
I
did.
I went
You
after you and
you
I wouldn't let it go. And I was like, it's a funnier bit this way. And
Oh my god.
I'm not saying I was wrong, but I do apologize. Because I have been down in Los Angeles for the last 2 weeks.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
my story last week was coming down to work for the week, but having filmed a video project, an event
Yeah.
on Sunday night.
Yes.
Coming from the Bay Area, a cool and easy 75 degrees.
Easy breezy.
Coming Driving down to LA and preparing to work a half day because I'm crazy like that, because when work is available, it's
You're a
available and
fucking
I go do
lunatic.
it.
You're a
But I
fucking
came
lunatic.
to LA in my jeans and then began to load a truck in 92-degree heat. And I was like, I hate this. And I have a little bit of sympathy for my sibling now. I did
Wow.
I did then, but like I said, I did choose violence. I was
You
like
I did I have this, like, vague recollection of just, like, fucking catching strays for no reason and being like, I don't I don't know what is happening, and I don't really understand why Evan's being kind of a dick, but also, like, I just need him to stop talking so I can stop doing
Oh, man. I think it'll go down in the annals of history as a great
I
episode
you
for
know,
all of these reasons.
all of these reasons and more. The other thing I'll say is that, prior to recording Stardust, I had not read the, Vulture article, uh, called "There Is No Safe Word," which is about, Neil Gaiman and his, let's just say, quote unquote, alleged sexual abuse.
Right.
And after reading that, it was fucking horrifying. It's one of the most harrowing things I've ever read about abuse
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
coercion
Yeah.
and fucking human trafficking, basically. And
Mhm.
I feel like, just in terms of Stardust being a Neil Gaiman uh,
Maybe
story, I
maybe
feel
the
like
fairies of justice were coming down upon our podcast.
yes, I was gonna say I feel like this is no shade to any of the folks that worked on the film, actors, art department, anything like that. But I feel like we maybe gave it what it deserved a little bit. In light of having read that
I
Vulture
mean
article after the fact, I was kind of like,
it's a very decent movie, and I don't
it
really believe
is.
in throwing the hard work of many people under the bus because of one person who happens to be its author. I mean, you know, or, Ender's Game can still be a
Yeah,
book that means a lot to people, even if Orson Scott Card is a shitty person, you
he's
know?
such a shithead, and
Um,
I think the
yeah.
fact that we were talking about, yes, Stardust is a book that Neil Gaiman wrote, but Stardust the film took the work of many hands,
Mhm.
and it does not rest solely on one one person.
Yeah.
But still, uh, yeah, I was just sort of after reading that article, I was like, well, fuck it, I guess. Like, I guess it is what it is.
I listened to the whole, was it the BBC? I listened to the whole, like
Tortoise
Tortoise
Media.
Media. I listened to the whole, like, 5 or 6 episode Tortoise Media, interviews with the victims breakdown, and yeah,
Wow.
it's super fucking upsetting. It's like,
Yeah, it was.
wow, this is really, really, really fucking bad.
Yeah, I read the article and then I went to go listen to the podcast and I was just like, I can't do this right now. Because I was like, this is nothing but a tale of true depravity and horror. And yeah, just across I was like, fucking Jesus. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Speaking of A Tale of True Depravity and Horror, I think we've got a really great movie to talk about in our hands that deals with that subject matter.
Hell
It's Pan's
yeah.
Labyrinth. Oh, but first we should do our introduction.
Do you wanna do it or do you want me to just kick it off? I can't remember who did it last time, as
I think you
previously
did it.
stated. I
I
think I
think
did
you
it
did it
last
last
time
time.
because I was just like, "Fucking let's go, let's, run this through, like, we got it."
I
Blah, blah,
thought
blah,
you
blah, blah.
didn't remember anything.
That was at the
You were
very
still
beginning.
you were
I
still
had a
somewhat cognizant
I
for the
had
beginning.
I had momentary, lucidity at the beginning of the episode.
Oh man. All right, let's kick this started because yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. One of my uh I already knew it was one of my favorite films, and I watching it again was reminded why it is so. We'll get into that. Okay, let's do this. Brother sibling movie. Welcome, friends and chosen family, to Brother Sibling Movie, a podcast where two siblings, that's us, talk about movies we know and love from our childhood, and some that we may be discovering for the first time, centered around a different theme every season. I'm your brother, Evan Kerna.
And I'm your sibling, Mare Morgan.
And this season, season three's theme is revisionist fairy tales, reinterpretations of classic tales or amalgamations of such in the hands of some of cinema's most brilliant minds, at least in
Yes.
this case.
Yes, and this week's film is Guillermo del Toro's 2006 film Pan's Labyrinth, which I don't know if there is a better revisionist. I don't know if there's a better artist and storyteller to tell a revisionist fairy tale, and I don't know if there is a better example of a revisionist fairy tale in recent times than
The
this.
vibe of this, the
Oh,
critique, if you remember, of that I had of Stardust, of like it was advertised to me as a fairy tale for adults, and I wanted more of that out of Stardust. Uh, that's this movie.
that's what this
This
is.
that's what this is.
Yes.
So everything about this movie is the vibe that I wanted Stardust to be, and
Correct.
the thematic um gut punch that I was expecting about
Yes.
with you know, things to say about the human condition as contextualized through uh, fairy tales. Yeah,
Yes. This is, not the
it's a rated R, baby.
yeah, it's fucking rated R. And hang on.
Fucking punk rock.
I picked So I picked 2 reviews. So every for each episode we pull like user reviews and user summaries from what are hopefully real people on either IMDb or Letterboxd to kind of
Yes.
start the conversation off. And we pull in terms of the reviews, we pull like a 1-star review and a 5-star review, basically, or like a half star and a 5-star, a 1-star and a 10-star, right? Like we
Right.
kind of both ends of the spectrum. The 2 reviews I picked are specifically in conversation with each other, and I think it will be a
Interesting.
great way to start it off. They are a little on the long side, but I think they are both really valuable. Um,
Ooh, I like
so
this.
do you wanna
Should we
do our summary?
Yes, I found an IMDb summary from Cinema Fan, who I believe we've heard from before.
We have.
Here's a bare bones discussion, and maybe I will add in a few things just to throw a little context in there. Ophelia, a young girl in 1944 Spain. Ophelia's love of fairy tales is obvious from the beginning of El Laberinto del Fauno, the Spanish language title of Pan's Labyrinth. Set in the not so tranquil Spanish woodlands right after World War II, the Spanish Civil War, where a small band of anti phalangist rebels are hiding out. Uh, am I pronouncing that right? Phalangist? I don't know. They're Franco's
I
people.
I think so. I did a little bit of a hyper focused deep dive on Francisco Franco and Franco is Spain, and I don't know how
Mhm.
any of it's pronounced because I've only ever read it.
Nice. Okay, cool. So we will go forward knowing we know nothing.
Yep.
uh, this is where Ophelia and her pregnant mother have come to live, in the company of Capitan Vidal, Ophelia's new stepfather and soon to be father of her half brother. It is with the brutal, unforgiving, and totalitarian idealist Capitan Vidal and his phalangist troops, who must weed out these resistance fighters of the hills and woods, that Ophelia finds her release and distraction of the New World Order and its warring factions, and delves into the older, mysterious, and enchanting world of fairies, fauns, and giant frogs. Beautiful, charming, graphic, and deadly. El Laberinto del Fauno. And I would also like to add, not in this review, is the uh, tale of a immortal princess who comes up from the underground to live life as a mortal, but can never get back to her underground kingdom and meet her father again. Uh, Pan, El Fauno, encounters, or Ophelia encounters him, and he tells her that she is the long lost princess who has lost her memory, and
Mhm.
she must uh, obtain a number of items through 3 very intense, what would you call them? Challenges,
Trials,
trials.
trials,
Yeah, thank you.
tasks.
Tasks, to unlock the her way back into the underground kingdom. And so this is the story and the tasks that Ophelia is taking on as um, the warring of the factions of the totalitarians and the communist rebels in the hills are is going on in the adult world. So
Yes.
that's the basic premise of Pan's Labyrinth, and I think it's time to get into some a 1 and 2 star a 1 and 10
Yeah.
star review
All
situation.
right. So we're gonna start off with a 1-star. So these are both from IMDb. This is a 1-star review titled "Harmful at Best" by Paul K-20. This is from May 31st, 2007.
Mhm.
Okay, now Paul K-20 says, as I see movies made within the past 20 years climb the ranks of the IMDb top 250 with alarming speed, I wonder what on earth is happening. I see that this movie is at number 41, higher than Chinatown, The Third Man, To Kill a Mockingbird, Alien, The Bridge on the River Kwai, Metropolis, and even The Wizard of Oz. Does Pan's Labyrinth deserve such high praise? Yes, it is steeped in intellectual metaphor and is crafted in such a Philip K. Dickian manner that the audience is left wondering what was real in the film. I applaud the filmmakers' ability in this manner, but regarding what they are willing to portray, They have the restraint of sociopaths. This movie
Whoa.
contains some of the most wretched, horrific violence and psychologically uncomfortable character interactions I have ever seen in a film. Early in the movie, we watch as the cruel Captain Vidal crushes the face of an innocent young man while his helpless father watches. Vidal shoots the father moments later after the man had to watch his son die in front of him. Art is no longer on the minds of movie makers. Instead, they revel in their abilities to accurately replicate grisly murders and terrible nightmares. Suggesting violence gives way to indulging in the talents of the makeup artists and the FX men. I would love PS, I would love to see X-Men, but it's FX men, and it's just all the FX people who have special
Wolverine is
powers.
applying prosthetics.
Yes, exactly. Okay, sorry. Okay, we're back to the review. Subtlety and metaphor are discarded, so the audience is not simply a witness to gruesome murders, but is forced to be a part of them. The story, fascinating as its concept may be, is buried under layers of constant uncomfortableness. There's a word for that, Paul. It's discomfort. There is no relief for the audience. Thanks to the movie establishing the evil of Vidal early on, the audience squirms in dread, anticipation, in dreaded anticipation for what his next cruel act will be and who he will direct his wrath towards. The movie ultimately delivers, committing the cardinal sin that a movie can make, showing the graphic death of a child. Pay It Forward tried this bit of emotional manipulation and lost any credibility it had as a story. The narrative was lost, the escapism destroyed. Once the innocent little girl died in Pan's Labyrinth, the audience remembers that they're watching a story and their emotions are being toyed with. I despise seeing such films because I ultimately feel anger, not towards the characters in the films, but at the filmmakers themselves for presenting me with such atrocities. I know Pan's Labyrinth is based in folklore, but I don't believe for a second that this is any kind of fairy tale. When a parent reads a child Hansel and Gretel, the visuals are very cartoony and are relayed through the buffer of said parent. With this film, in quotation marks, there is nothing there is nothing but blood seeping from the mouth of an innocent little girl to tell the audience that the fairy tale is over. A fairy tale for adults? That's false advertising, and I hope that all with weak stomachs are fairly warned.
God damn, Paul.
Woo!
Woo!
Paul!
All
You
right, Paul.
Paul, my
Uh
dude. First of all, I'm so sorry that your wife left you right before you wrote this review.
Oh
Second,
my
fucking
god.
shit, man. Like, holy fuck.
It's
I
interesting because I do see his because I agree with his point about Pay It Forward. Um,
Sure.
that movie is stupid. But
I think
well,
it's
anyway,
I wanna point out, that he's talking about this, like, movie in terms of rankings on IMDb, which, like, first of all, you probably have other things that you could concern your time with. Um, but also, I'm like, you just talked about Chinatown, which
To
is a
Kill a Mockingbird.
very violent film. To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a pretty awful story. The Bridge on the River Kwai is about a fucking Japanese POW camp. Like, what is your barometer, sir? But we're not here to judge you. It's interesting. It's just
Yes.
interesting.
I'll reserve my thoughts for after the
Okay.
reviews are over, but,
Okay. So
well,
now,
whatever. Suffice to say that I don't agree with Paul.
I don't agree with Paul either. So here is a a sort of this is a 10-star review, 10 out of 10 stars from IMDb from user EJ Avignon from February 27th, 2007. Um and I felt like I said, I felt this was very much directly in
In conversation with
conversation.
the yeah, it was like a
Okay.
response to it in many
Yes.
ways.
And this is titled It Really Deserves All the Acclaim. The negative reviews of this film on IMDb seem to fall into two categories. A, it was too violent. B, the fantasy element was too muted. Without getting too political, worse things are going on in the world at this very moment than were depicted in this film. While many people prefer entertainment that insulates them from the harsh realities of the world, one shouldn't get so indignant when a film portrays the world for what it is. Capitan Vidal is a fictitious character, but there are plenty of people exactly like him. Humans are capable of terrible atrocities, and looking the other way does nothing to improve our nature. If violence offends people so much, then they should do something about real violence rather than writing nasty reviews about depictions of it. The violence set a tone of desperation for Ophelia. Fairy tales themselves are extremely violent, and Disney cartoons are nothing like the stories they were based on. This film was rated R. What were you expecting? It is easier to understand people who thought that the fantasy element was eclipsed and were maybe hoping for another Narnia or one of the other countless fantasy flicks that has come out in the wake of Lord of the Rings. This film touched on many of the most fundamental themes of mythology, such as parallel worlds, dangerous tasks, hidden identities, sacrifice, and death. It did something more than a standard fantasy movie, which is part of why it was such a great film. End review.
There we go. I mean, without getting into what those things were, Evan Eja
E.J. Avignon.
EJ Vignon. Oh yeah,
Avignon.
EJ Avignon uh puts it succinctly
Yes.
and preciously. So
I love that, and I was definitely it was one of those things that the part of, this review that I really liked was fairy tales themselves are extremely violent, and Disney cartoons are nothing like the stories they were based on.
so true.
Paul was talking about Hansel and Gretel, right? Hey,
As an example,
as
yeah.
an example. That is about 2 children who are left in the woods to starve to death because their family can't afford to feed
By
them
their parents.
by their parents because their parents
Mhm.
can't afford to feed them in, like, the wake of the Great Famine in Europe, and then
Mhm.
they're stolen by a witch
Who
who
eats kids.
who eats children. She puts Hansel in a cage to get him fat. He has to use a finger bone of a child in his cage to be like, "I'm still skinny. Don't kick me out. Don't eat me yet." And then he and his sister shove said witch in a fucking oven.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what I don't know how
I don't know what
people
world this guy is living in,
I
but
don't
yeah.
either. But I'm like, fairy tales, there has been a massive disservice that Disney has done to fairy tales in general, I think, in that those stories are dark, they are violent, they are horrendous, and there's a reason for that, and it's okay. Should you maybe be telling them to like a 4-year-old? I don't know, like depends on what kind of psychological damage you feel like dealing. Um, but like they are that way for a reason. It's not like they're parables, they're
These have
you
been passed down, from, years and years of telling and retelling because
yeah,
they stick with kids and people, and
yeah,
as you come back to these tales, there are more and more lessons to draw from them at different ages.
yeah,
And yeah, like, it's true. There's a reason okay, not to get too into it before our discussion, but the reason that there's a double storyline cutting back and forth between the basically the adult world and Ophelia's imaginative world is because that adult world is what is fueling the creation of this fantasy. The fantasy and imagination elements are a response to the horrors that Ophelia is witnessing around her. Even if she's not
Yeah.
witnessing them directly, she has a intuitive sense that something isn't right. And mm, to a child, those things have to be contextualized in a different way, in an imaginative way, so that um, these horrors can be um, uh, uh, interpreted and understood in a way that can make some amount of sense to a child, so that instead of humans doing the horrors, they are monsters. And
Yeah,
obviously, as
exactly.
the older you get, you realize that monsters are people, are just people, and sometimes they do horrible, monstrous things.
Yes, exactly. And it's about learning how to like find your agency and power and overcome those things and best the evil forces. So,
Indeed.
yeah,
Great
fucking
reviews. Way to
I
find those.
I was I do love a one-star review that just is
Mhm.
fucking out of pocket. But these ones I was like, no, these are salient and yeah, I was like, I feel like the people that that seemed emblematic of the
Mhm.
people that didn't like Pan's Labyrinth that were giving it the 1 and 2-star reviews. All of them were like, "It's so violent. It should have been a fairy tale. Why was it so violent? It's so dark." And I was like, "What? Fuck. What?"
I'll get into it more, but
Yeah.
we've also been from Disney, and also to a certain extent Spielberg, and I love Spielberg, but
I
we've been
yes.
in Hollywood movies, we've been because of him in many ways, and other people like him, we've been given this edict in stories that, like, you never harm the kid, and
The
that
world
is
doesn't have
good
that
for.
edict?
Right.
Sorry.
That's not how the world works all the time. No one is ultimately safe necessarily, especially during wartime. And to think that a movie that is using the tropes and the retellings of story tales to make a contextualized point about fascist regimes and wartime and the horrors that are visited upon children, that wouldn't depict horrifying violence and wouldn't allow for the possibility that children can die and do die every day when things like this are happening, is like, it's just a different kind of movie, dude, you know?
Yeah, it's
It's
that's
I'm
the
sorry that I'm sorry that it's not like, you know, it was hey, it's a Spanish language movie. You should have known you weren't getting a complete Hollywood, the Hollywood treatment.
yeah,
Like,
and it's
it's okay to watch cinema to become to get closer to uncomfortable ideas.
yeah, and also like you're not owed a happy ending as a viewer,
That's
right? Like
true. Yeah.
you're you're owed a good story. You're not
Hmm.
owed that everything going perfectly well and amazing at every turn. Like that
It
doesn't make a
wasn't
good story
sunshine.
necessarily.
It wasn't sunshine and lollipops in 1944 Spain. And guess what? It's not sunshine and lollipops right now either.
Nope. Nope, it's trash.
Let's take a quick commercial break.
Yay!
Yay! This episode of Brother Sibling Movie is sponsored by Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion, a first of its kind experiential play palace for grown-ups. Are you unable to see the joy in everyday life? Do you like slides and ball pits? Come on down to Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion, where the fun is real and the talking rabbits are too. And no, they won't tell you what's in the tea. Wink.
Thanks, Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion, for sponsoring this week.
Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion takes no accountability or responsibility for severed limbs and uncouth things that any of the imagined or fantasy elements and people you encounter might say to you.
Yep.
Please, Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to direct your life in a 180-degree turnaround way of any kind.
And it definitely won't cure complex PTSD. It's fine.
Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion, yeah,
Yeah.
for the kid and all of us. But you have to be an adult to come in. Don't bring your kids.
It's got
Oh,
4 kids.
it's gonna get weird. Uh,
Oh,
this sounds like a
okay.
great place. I'd love to go. We
I'd
should
love
go sometime.
I'd love to go too. I think it would be really fun. I think it'd be really fun.
We need to make a theme song.
I know.
Magic Mandy's Mushroom Mansion. None of it is real. Ow!
Wow. And we're back.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about our connection to Pan's Labyrinth, El Laberinto del Fauno. Mer, when did you first watch Pan's Labyrinth, and what were your takeaways then? First of
I I watched it when I was 16 when it first came out because
all.
I was very lucky that when I was 16 I had a car, and a thing that I did a lot at that time was I would go to see movies by myself. Uh,
Hmm.
and it was awesome.
Yeah, like
And
a cool
I
kid.
like a super cool kid who wanted to get out of the house and did not want to talk to people. So I saw it at what used to be the Rialto Theater on Summerfield Drive in Santa Rosa, and I loved it. I remember thinking at the time that I wanted more fantasy stuff. That I was
Hmm.
like,
That there
wow,
wasn't enough of it in the world.
that there wasn't enough of it in the world, and I wanted more fantasy
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, Lord of the
Um,
Rings had taken the world by storm at this
oh,
point, and
100%.
Return of the King had wrapped up in 2003, so this is 3 years later, and it is starting to happen. There's starting to be much
Yeah.
more fantasy films are getting greenlit by various,
Yeah,
studios.
and there were and those were kind of like fully immersive, fantasy films, but I was kind of like, "Oh man, like the all the fantasy stuff was so cool and I just wanted more of it." And now in the kind of intervening 20 years ish,
Mhm.
uh I've grown to love Pan's Labyrinth more and more and more, and I as a more mature person with uh, different sensibilities, I'm like, this is not a movie that is solely exists for the fantasy elements. The fantasy elements serve the story. Um,
Yeah.
and the restraint of those fantasy elements is actually what makes this film so incredibly strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, my interpretation of it, my enjoyment of it, etc., has definitely changed over the years to make me enjoy it even more.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I saw this movie when it came out. Uh like so many things that occurred during my college years. Don't quite remember when or where, but
Yep.
I remember I saw it and loved it immediately. Maybe didn't quite get everything about it, but the vibe and the freakiness of it, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
really spoke to me. And it was it and yeah, like in my active memory, I remember I think everybody kind of remembers the fairy tale and the fantasy element the most. Obviously they stick out. There's
Yeah.
just incredible visual things that happen. I mean, we'll get into talking about, Doug Jones's great character, the monster with the
Oh my
hands, with the
god.
eyes and stuff, which is just incredible and just very inventive. Um, but Yeah, to your point, like, this is really a story about, you know, a this is really a tragedy, a tragic story about what happens under fascist regimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tale about and how it affects the most vulnerable of us, the most imaginative, children, and how fucked up and sad that is. Um,
Absolutely.
and yeah, I mean, whatever. We'll see how this goes, but yeah, I was like weeping writing my takeaways for it. It's like a very powerful movie, and I only get more out of it the older that I get, the more I witness of the world, the more deeply I sense the depth of injustices in the world, and I think
Yeah.
that Pan's Labyrinth is one of those movies that brings that out. So, anyway,
Yeah,
I've
it's
watched it many times over the years and, always knew it was, like, a cool movie, but, um, there was some movie I was watching recently, what the heck was it? It was similar to this in that it was I w so recently I went to, um, see just this weekend, I was at the Hollywood Bowl, and I went to go see Jurassic Park in concert. So the Hollywood Bowl
oh,
puts on
fun.
shows where
Yeah.
they play the movie, and then the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra plays the score along with the movie. And, we get to the scene, where the people see the dinosaurs for the first time. They see the brachiosaurs
Yep,
in and it's the first time you hear the swelling music and everything. And I always thought that scene like worked because of the dinosaurs. Like because visual effects brain, you're like, it's incredible that they like didn't show that much of the dinosaurs. They showed just enough, and they put a lot of effort into it to make sure that the dinosaurs looked good. And part of what makes that scene so resonate so emotionally is how the restraint and the power and the craft that the visual effects people brought to make the dinosaurs. That's true, but this time I realized, but none of that would work if the actors didn't sell the emotion.
yeah,
It always has to be based on what is happening to human beings, people that we are witnessing, people whose story we're taking in. And it's the same with this movie, like this
exactly.
is a tale about human beings during wartime, during horrendous things happening, during people who are monstrous in their intentions. And that is, again, I'm just talking about like my fucking big, like what, like how I first watched this movie, and I can't help getting into this stuff. Suffice to say, it's a great movie, and I knew it right away, but maybe I knew it right away focusing on some of the wrong details. Like the human story, the adult story of the war is just as important as Ophelia's tale of what she has to do to get the trials and the tale of her doing those things
Yeah,
gives context and understanding to the horrors of war that she is witnessing and that these humans are going through.
yeah. I Man, I couldn't agree more. I think that is one of the I was watching a few interviews with Guillermo del Toro, right?
Nice.
About Pan's Labyrinth and
Hmm.
about making this film. And some of them were happening at the time that the film was
Hmm.
being made, and some were happening, 15 years after the fact,
Yeah.
that the film had come out. And I I wanted to maybe I think doing a what we liked and what we didn't like about this movie is not useful because I think suffice it to say we both liked everything and there's not really anything that we didn't like.
I don't yeah, I thought they could've like, the fairies didn't seem totally realistic to me, the CG is a little chunky sometimes, but, they didn't
But
have a
it
lot
was 2006. Like,
I can forgive that, I don't really fucking care about that, like
yes. Um I so there's this interview that this is from a 2020 Warner Brothers interview
Mhm,
that Guillermo del Toro did. I just pulled out a few quotes. In no particular order, he said, "I didn't want it, meaning the story, the fairy tale story. I didn't want it to feel new. I wanted it to feel eternal." Kind of talking about like I want this story to feel like a story that's been passed down for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that this is the most recent retelling of it. Even though it
mhm.
is a fully new story, he was like, I didn't want it to feel like that. I wanted it to feel steeped in this lore. Um, he he also said this really interesting thing that I'll talk a little bit more about in my final thoughts and takeaways. He said, quote, geography, religion, gender, these are a lot of things that we construct to operate as a society, but they are not real. If you look at geography, it isn't real. There are no lines delineating the US and Mexico. It's just earth and water. The fact that we accept those boundaries, they're inventions, they're fantasy. End quote. And I was like,
God, I love
fucking
Guillermo del Toro so much.
I was like, "Fucking Guillermo del Toro, why are you like this? Why are you so good?" And so, he also said in talking about why Pan's Labyrinth has had such staying power and, like, why it still resonates with people,
Mhm,
he was talking about how he kinda knows that his films aren't for everybody, and he said, quote, I knew this movie will connect long term. Some people will love it. I had that certainty. I feel that when a movie connects deeply, there is an element of it that you cannot explain. And he goes on to talk about how it's like music, where okay, that's a C sharp or that's a this tone,
yeah,
but it's the sum of its parts and it moves you with an emotion and you can't describe it.
yeah.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Making a movie is way more like, composing and conducting a symphony than all anything else, sometimes it seems.
Yeah. And then the last one, he was talking about his, what makes him unique as a director,
Mhm.
as a storyteller.
Yeah, this
And
freaky, freaky guy.
he's a freaky guy. He's like also just like seems like the sweetest man. He he said, I have never this is such like Mexican melodrama and I fucking love it. He said, quote, I have never made a movie that I wouldn't want to die for. End
Mhm,
quote. And then he was going on to say like he's like on every movie I've ever worked on, at some point I have given up my salary or personally paid for an extra day of shooting
mhm,
or like given up like paid not just financially but like emotionally whatever for these movies
mhm,
um because he said, quote, the way that I see it is that I am an art collector and I want to buy that piece of art that is that movie. If I love it with that depth, something of me is going to be there. And that is partially what he said in response to like, why do you think your films are so unique and why you have such staying power. And I just love him.
totally.
I just love him. He's like
Yeah, he's the
the
best.
sweetest,
He's like
biggest,
he
cuddliest teddy bear, and he has like the
yeah,
most fucked up brain, and I love him.
yeah. Yeah, I love the quotes that he has to say about, like, monsters and how, like, he was surrounded by monsters as a kid and he, like, wanted to make them his friends. He was like,
Yeah.
"I like, people never made sense to me, but, like, monsters did, and I wanted to, like, be part of their world more than I wanted to be part of our world." Um, I really love yeah, this is a great one. We almost had, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio on the
Yes.
podcast this season, And I think it's probably right not to talk about it for this season, although it is a great
Oh, it's
reinterpretation of
fantastic.
Pinocchio. It's like, honestly, I think it might be my favorite stop motion film. It's fucking, it's so good. But and not everybody agrees with that, but
They're
I'm one of those
wrong.
people for
They're fucking
right. I'm one
wrong.
of those people with who it was exactly the right thing.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we're talking about this one because I mean, this is a element that goes throughout all of GDT's work.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the themes that he makes even more explicit in Pinocchio are already present in this
Absolutely.
movie, right?
I was
And also like
absolutely
the
yes.
yeah, and also the a movie that he made previous to this, The Devil's Backbone. I think El Spino del Diablo. Espina. I don't remember the Spanish word for spine, but anyway, which is another great movie and is kind of telling of what will come in Pan's Labyrinth because it's about kids in a basically like an orphanage in the middle of nowhere,
Mm.
and then bad things are happening, and there is kind of a supernatural element. He didn't, have the budget to do a full fantasy thing, but that fantasy element of like devils lurking beneath and kind of like the horrors that are the people that are surrounding these children that are taking advantage of them and stuff is definitely still there. Um, anyway, there's a lot to talk about with Guillermo del Toro, and I could talk for hours about it. But just to say that in Devil's Backbone, in Pan's Labyrinth, in Pinocchio, and Pan's Labyrinth hits on it very well. He loves talking about and exploring this concept of like so often fairy tales the the message of a fairy tale so often is like the world is dangerous, like obey your
Yeah.
parents, like obey what your people have to say, obey because otherwise you might get eaten. And what I love, again, maybe this is just my messed up brain, but it jives with Guillermo del Toro, is that like his entire ethos is like, no, disobey, like
Yeah.
don't listen to these people. They don't know any better than you do.
Mhm.
Like follow what you know is right. Like fuck the fascists, fuck the authority figures. Like do the thing that you know is right because you know better than these people. And
Yeah.
I love
It's
that.
I do too, and I think it's again Del Toro is somebody that he's so steeped in
Oh
certainly
my god,
horror films,
everything,
like everything, like
horror films, visual effects culture, fairy tales,
fairy
mythology,
tales,
fucking luchador movies,
like
like
he's
classical Hollywood cinema, classic Mexican cinema, like work anyway. Yeah.
he's such a prolific collector of all
Hmm.
these things, right?
Yeah.
And he has taken so many of those and wants to always be creating something new. And I think that even comes through in his storytelling because if you are, yeah, if you are reading most fairy tales, it's like, no, kids should obey, do the thing that your parents say. But yes, I agree that
Hmm.
his whole ethos is like, you probably know better,
Hmm.
than your parents because all of, again, like geography, religion, da da da, like those are fantasies too. Those are made up
Hmm.
too. And
Yeah.
just because you have a certain set of how quote unquote how things should be, it doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
that that is what is the like correct thing to do.
Yeah.
And I just I think that it is such a breath of fresh air in terms of every movie I've ever seen by Guillermo del Toro that there is such a conviction and such a dedication to what he sees. Like he was
Yeah.
even I was listening to some of the behind the scenes stuff and um his special effects team and the like the fabrication team and everybody that was working on this kept being like he is so exacting, and he is like, I've never worked as hard as I have for him. Like, I've never worked as
Mhm.
hard as I have for Guillermo, and it's so frustrating because you're like, "Fuck," like, now we have to rebuild this whole thing because, like, you want this
Yeah.
one thing changed, but it's better. It is better. It's always better, and it makes you
Mhm.
better. Like, it
Right.
him
That
pushing makes you
yeah.
a better artist, and it's infuriating.
Guillermo del Toro, just to talk a little bit about his background because I think it's super interesting, is that Guillermo del Toro did a lot of things, but the first thing he did in his professional career was two things. He was basically an art department person, or he was a prosthetics and he was a makeup guy. Was
That
one of the first
makes
things he did.
that makes so much sense. That
Yeah,
makes
and
so
that's
much
what
sense.
he how he where he cut his teeth in the Mexican, film business, and he worked as a makeup and prosthetics effect artist on a really incredible movie called, Cabeza de Vaca,
Ooh.
which is about a Spanish explorer shipwrecking on the Florida Keys in the 16th century and then getting kidnapped by these like shamans and learning magic from like people in Central America and becoming basically
Yes.
like a shamanistic healer and then
Yes.
sticking it to the man like the Christian like people that were coming to
Establishment. Yeah.
colonize or whatever, and it's a real fucking story. Anyway, Cabeza de Vaca is incredible. We should watch it sometime. It's
Okay,
great.
we're gonna have to put that in some kinda list somewhere.
Yeah,
That's
and
you know, awesome.
yeah, it's an incredible movie, and Guillermo del Toro was a makeup artist on it. And his first movie that he was going to direct he was going to be a stop motion film. He had created a company and had basically built everything, and then I'd have to look up the details, but, like, they had basically gone through months and months of pre-production, and, like, a week or something before the shoot, somebody broke in and stole everything and set
What?
fire to the place. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of insane, like
Holy shit.
yeah, it's, like, kind of an
What?
incredible sto it's so incredible that part of me wonders if it's true, but, like, knowing Guillermo del Toro, it probably is.
It probably
Um,
is.
and,
That's insane.
yeah, so that's crazy. So then he was like, "Okay, I have to not do something where I have to start all of that from scratch." And then he moved into a live action movie to become his first film, Kronos, which is also
Wow.
great.
Yeah.
Kronos is another great one worth talking about because he does so much with so little. Anyway, try not to make this a total just Guillermo del Toro gab fest. But yes, he is like that kind of exacting artistic mind. Man, there was a Guillermo del Toro exhibit at MoMA, kind of similar to the Tim
Ooh.
Burton one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
oh man, did I go to that with you?
I don't think so. I would have remembered that.
Yeah. Anyway,
I
it
don't think
was
so.
incredible and just he's an art collector, like an actual art collector too, and
Yeah.
has all kinds of crazy stuff from his home that was displayed. He's had like wax figures of his heroes made, like, that live in his house. So, like, famous
What?
stop motion animation visual effects pioneer Ray Harryhausen, he, like, made a life-size he commissioned a life-size wax figure of Ray Harryhausen and Boris
What?
Karloff's Frankenstein and a couple other people. Those are the ones that I remember. He just has these in his home. Oh, he also has a
I
room in his house, apparently, this isn't from the exhibit, where he's rigged it so that it's always raining outside. It's just a gloomy room that he can go to like write and type and sculpt and stuff like this. Just like this
I
fucker is insane and I love it.
I just, I aspire to that of
Right.
making my home so specific
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
me as a
Yeah.
person, because 'cause I'm
Yeah.
like, that is some next level shit right
Yeah.
there.
Sure is.
That is next level shit.
So
Um,
all of this to say that
uh,
as a person who has been a like a I assume a prop maker and a prosthetics makeup person, somebody very close to the special effects world, as opposed to visual effects being whatever stuff you do with the camera, special effects being the stuff you do for the camera, like prosthetics and
yeah,
things like that, makeup. Uh, that's his where he began his journey.
it
And it's very
yeah,
telling because obviously it bleeds into all of the incredible artwork and craftsmanship and prosthetics and sets and everything that you see in this movie. So
yeah, he has a very specific visual, and that is he is not going to sacrifice that vision and those
no,
visuals. And so this is one thing I did want to talk a little bit about Doug Jones, or
hell yeah, let's talk about
as I
Doug
put it
Jones.
in our Doug motherfucking Jones. So if you don't know who Doug Jones is, first of all, he's the best actor whose face you've never seen. Um, he has he is an actor, but he has made a name for himself um by being this very, I don't know how to describe it even. He is like the perfect creature actor. He is very tall and very skinny, and he has just like naturally like a very long wingspan. Like his arms are really long.
Mhm.
Um and he he was even in one of these documentaries, he was talking about how he doesn't always view his work as an actor so much as an artist as he does as an athlete, in terms
Mhm.
of the physical demands of needing to be like, if I'm uncomfortable, I have to push through. If a prosthetic is getting to me, like I've got to just like I've got to ignore it. Like, and in this film, which is an interesting thing that I did not know until I watched these kind of behind the scenes things, he he is in this film, he is El Fauno, he is the faun, and
Mhm.
he is also the blind man, the big scary hands on his
Yeah,
eyes
mhm.
guy,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that is him in the suit, in both of those prosthetics. That is him.
Mhm.
He does not speak Spanish. This entire film is in Spanish. He does not speak Spanish.
Yeah.
He gave all of his lines in Spanish.
Yeah.
Um, and
Insane.
everybody was commenting on like, I don't know how Doug does it. He's like in these crazy prosthetics. He's like walking backwards. He's doing all these things, and he's speaking Spanish, which he doesn't speak. Like he he was just learning it, and it was because he was like, well, the the girl who plays Ophelia, Andriana something,
Mhm.
Ivana, I sorry, I can't remember her name. She doesn't speak English. She's 12 in this film. She doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, I kind of like have to." And if
Ivana
I
Vaquero.
Ivana Vaquero. So it was also just a like because I think they did do like they did a voiceover of the fawn and everything, like
Mhm.
with a Spanish speaking actor. But it was like, well, the lips won't look right if I'm not speaking in Spanish,
Right.
right? Like it won't work. And also like this little girl isn't gonna understand what I'm saying when
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
acting together. Um, but he's he seems so kind, and just I mean, like, he's also he was the fish guy in The Shape of Water, in
Mhm.
Hellboy, he was,
The
Abe,
fish man.
the fish man. He's been many, many of those kinds of characters, and
Abe Sapien is
Abe
his name.
Sapien, thank you. It is truly astounding that he is able to do what he does.
Yeah,
Um,
he's skinny enough that they can put prosthetics on him to make him be any shape that they need him to be in a lot of ways,
exactly,
which is very cool,
exactly.
and he is such a physical actor, and strong, one would assume that a lot
Dude,
yeah, a lot of his acting and the expression comes from the movement.
it was
Um
I was watching, behind the scenes of him putting on the fawn prosthetic, and I wanna talk about
Mhm.
that kind of piece by piece in a second. But
Yeah.
I will just say, speaking to, like, his strength, he's getting into the suit, and he's a really skinny dude,
Yeah.
but he is, like, whipcord and sinew. Like,
Mhm.
he is, like, fucking ripped.
Tiny.
He is ripped to shit, and he is just,
Mhm.
like, small. Like, he's just like a compact, you know, whatever. But
Mhm.
anyway, so this fawn prosthetic, right?
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Okay. So, they and I think this speaks to the incredible mastery of the entire team that designed it,
Mhm.
as well as input from Guillermo del Toro,
Mhm.
that they constructed it in such a way that it is not one suit. Like, you do not, like, put it on and it's one suit.
Mhm.
There is and it also goes into, this was Doug Jones talking about how it's one of the most comfortable prosthetics that he's ever worn,
Oh,
because
interesting.
it's not one suit. He was like, mostly when you have a prosthetic and it's one thing, all of the weight of that prosthetic is on your shoulders. And
Mhm.
that prosthetic, you can't really move in it.
Yeah.
But this was in pieces. And so it was like the leg pieces were one thing that were held up by a belt. So his waist and hips were holding
Oh,
that weight.
yes. I've heard
And
this before. It's crazy. Like, so
like,
much, with physical strain of an entire costume basically
yes.
being on your hip bone.
Yes. And then it's like there was a belly abdomen piece, and there was like a vest piece and a jacket piece, and then the
Yeah.
head came down over his nose and
Mhm.
like upper lip, and then the
Yeah.
bottom of the jaw is a separate piece,
Yeah.
and the fawn head, where the horns are, is where all of the mechanics
Mhm.
of it are, so they could get the ears to move and the eyes to do stuff and, like,
Yeah.
have these, like, little ticks and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then they had, like, long gloves that had these things in the fingers to and all of this stuff,
Yeah.
and it was so fucking insane just watching them put all of this on, and the construction, as well as the thoughtfulness with which it was designed. Not
Yeah.
to just look a certain way, but actually give Doug Jones, the actor inside of it, a greater deal of flexibility, because he was like, "Yeah, I
Mhm.
can actually, like, move my torso, and
Right.
I can, lift my legs, and I can move my arms, like, and I can move my head because there's nothing, like, the thing that's attached to my head is not attached to my neck," kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Totally.
So it was so interesting and so fascinating, and the blind man thing is like foam and silicone, and they like had this crazy, like, it was strapped to his leg so they could, green out his leg. I don't know. It was just like it was so fascinating listening to the
Yeah.
people that are making it and that were like, yeah, I don't know how Doug is doing this. He's kind of a crazy person.
Yeah. He's one of those artists slash athletes dedicated to his craft,
He
and
is.
there's a reason that Guillermo del Toro keeps using him. I mean, he's like he can only do monsters. I think they met on Hellboy, probably,
I
and
think
Hellboy
so.
was one of the Guillermo del Toro, besides the sort of fairy tale movie inspired movies that we've been talking about, and Kronos did started doing comic book movies with I think he directed Blade 2.
He
He didn't
directed
direct the
Blade
first one,
2 and
and he
both
directed
Hellboy
the first two Hellboy movies. And so Hellboy was a huge success in 2004, and he used a lot of his, I think he must have used a lot of his clout and his ability to garner, funds, and put it all into this movie.
Yep.
And all the
Yep.
experience that he had had up to that point,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of an incredible legacy, and Doug Jones is part of that, getting him
Absolutely.
along the way, and he's become the iconic man in the monster suit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you see him out of prosthetics and it's just like him talking, it
Hmm.
is very much like, I see why you're good at this.
Yeah.
I see why you're good at this. You're a really good actor and you have a very specific and like truly kind of like a once in a generation physicality.
You have a note here that you want to go hard on talking about Franco as Spain, but will
I'm
restrain yourself.
I
Explain yourself.
I just realized in watching this film, I realized that
You don't know anything
during
about Franco's Spain.
I did it because I was
I
like, well,
don't.
I knew about, we're taught, high school history kind of stuff, World
Yeah,
War II, and about Hitler and Mussolini and
right.
Stalin and these, but specifically we were taught about those kind of fascist forces in Europe.
Mhm,
But Franco, the Spanish Civil War was happening right at the time that World War II was breaking out, and
mhm.
Spain did not fight in World War II. They did not
Yeah,
participate, but they were aligned with the Axis powers very
right.
strongly.
Mhm.
And it was interesting reading about it, and obviously, like, I'm gonna not be able to do a great job because I was just, like, reading
Yeah.
Wikipedia articles.
This is yeah, for the full breakdown, find your local history podcast.
Find your local history podcast. And it was kind of wild to, because the Franco was very much, people debate, apparently there's all this debate of like, was Franco a fascist? Was he an authoritarian? Was he a totalitarian? These
Mhm.
different structures, and it was kind of his own, I don't know, like special blend of dickhead, it seems like.
He was just kind of a bad dude,
Just
generally
like
speaking.
just like sort of not a good dude. But it was so interesting because he was like deeply Catholic,
Mhm.
deeply Catholic.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it, where, not that was not in other forms of European fascism necessarily at the time, but
Yeah.
it was a deeply Catholic system. And he was also very uh pro monarchy, like
Interesting.
especially later in his
Mhm.
kind of reign, because he was in power from like 36 to 75.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, he was in charge of Spain for
Mhm.
a fuck of a long time.
Yeah.
And this sort of initial kind of the beginning of his, I don't know, dictatorship, whatever you wanna call it, his fascist
Mhm.
regime, was incredibly violent and incredibly repressive. Like,
Hence the nature of the violence in this movie.
yeah,
Paul.
fucking Paul. So he so it's it's interesting to me because I was like, well, this movie takes place during, 1944 in Europe, in Spain, but this was very much what was happening in Spain, is that
Yeah, specifically that
Franco's
arena, that time period for
yes,
them.
for them, and it was like there were still, even though Franco was in power at the time in 1944 and the fascist government was in charge, there
Mhm.
were still these rebel groups and there were still these resistance arms, and they
Yeah.
were fucking violently put down. Like, there's an
Mhm.
estimated it's like the atrocities committed by Franco's government
Mhm.
put the casualty count somewhere in the 250 to 300,000-ish range of
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and most, if not all of those were political dissidents.
Yeah.
People that were speaking against him and saying like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, this is really bad."
Yeah.
Um, and it's something that, for an American, we are not taught about these other things that are going on. And like there
Yeah.
was there was Spain and Franco were involved in the, I think, French Algerian War in Algeria, and
Mhm.
Spain was involved in that conflict because Spain was a fucking colonist country and had holding like had colonized parts of northern Africa and
Mhm.
Central America, obviously,
Yeah.
South America, and
Yeah,
it
bro.
was
OG colonizers of the West Coast.
for real. They were so awful, and it's just something that this comes up in Guillermo del Toro's work. It's in Pinocchio, it's in this film, and it's another one of those uh things that we just don't really know a lot about in terms of history, right? Like it
Mhm.
because they get kind of swallowed up by these bigger conflicts. The same thing happened of the Japanese colonization of China right
Right.
before World War II,
Mhm.
the Armenian genocide right
Mhm.
before World War One. And they
Yeah.
kind of get swept under and not
Yeah.
really seen and talked about, and especially because at this time, Spain during Franco's reign, Spain was incredibly isolationist. They were
Mhm.
incredibly isolationist. Like you could not like pass the border, and like
Yeah.
it was a very intense time to be a Spanish citizen.
Yeah.
Um and the rest of the world kind of didn't know what was going on. Until the good US of A was like, "What if we made money off of you?" and convinced Franco to open up trading relations
There
because
you
America
go.
fucking sucks.
Pretty good playbook there.
Pretty good
It's
playbook.
tried and true.
It is tried and true. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I am kind of fascinated now, and I want to just know more about it. And like, if you have podcast or book recommendations, please send them to me.
Yeah.
Because especially, we try to make these episodes as evergreen as they can be, but I will just say if you're an American in 2025, you might have a special interest in learning more about fascistic and authoritarian governments for
Mhm.
reasons, just
For
for
reasons.
reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. Like Pan's Labyrinth is great as a historical film, just in
Mhm.
terms of what was going on, and in terms of the fucking cruelty that
Yeah.
these that those types of regimes allow to flourish and allow not just allow but celebrate, right? Like they celebrate that kind of cruelty. You have to be
Yeah, and I think that the movie does a great job of contextualizing it in a character way. Like Capitan Vidal is obviously like a horrendous person, and yet they give you just enough of like a little beat with him to give you some context. Maybe not full on empathy, but like you want to kind of understand why people do what they do, and they sort of the pocket watch that he carries around with him. He mentions that like his father gave it to him. It was cracked or broken when his father died, and his father was like, "Give this to my son, so he knows the time I died, and he knows how a real man goes out," or something.
yeah, it's
So like
fucked.
that's the kind of mentality that Capitan Vidal has, and in essence, a it is an example of what it's Guillermo del Toro's interpretation of what all of these people in this system are, going through, what they're the stuff that makes them tick, haha, or
Yeah.
not, is what that is about. It's like there's just these
Mhm.
layers of horrible men raising more horrible people to believe this nonsense about like being dictatorial, being hard, being rigid, being violent
Yeah.
is the way to exert your control, your ability
Yes.
to be a man and to, and they need it or whatever. So,
And that even comes up, because Carmen, who is Ophelia's mother, um, Carmen is pregnant with Capitan Vidal's son,
mhm,
Ophelia's stepbrother. And Capitan Vidal is so concerned about his son, about the fact that he is going to have a son,
mhm,
that he that is sort of his myopic focus when it comes to Carmen,
mhm,
is that she is not a woman, she is not a human. She does not have emotions or feelings.
mhm,
She exists to give him a son.
right.
And Ophelia is kind of this like small inconvenience,
Mhm,
you know? And one of my favorite parts of this film is at the very end of it after Ophelia has died and Capitan Vidal has like, taken his son after his fucking wife has died and he's explicitly said, "Don't save her. I don't care about her. I just want my son."
yeah.
Um Dick. He comes out of the labyrinth holding his son and the rebels are there because the rebels have like taken over the camp and he starts this whole what you can feel is about to be like a speech of tell my son who his father was and tell him blah blah blah. And Mercedes, the best character in this whole movie, I think, the
Mhm,
kind of one of the rebels is basically like, no, your son is never going to know who you are. Like that is, and it's sort of this like ultimate fuck you of
mhm,
just like you don't get to continue your cruelty in this world.
yeah,
Like we we are going to take your son and presumably raise him and my brother is going to shoot you through the fucking eye socket,
yeah.
cheekbone, and it's going to be fucking stick.
Yeah, that scene was pretty fucking punk rock,
It was
can't
so
lie.
good. It was so good. Oh my god. Yeah, I was just like, fuck yes. Uh but it also brought to mind, in The Shape of Water, Michael Shannon's character.
Yeah,
Very much kind of that same vibe, that same energy of just like, these dudes are so fucking up their own ass about being right and being the apex fucking predator or whatever,
yeah,
that yeah, you just like you can't help but hate them. Even the actor that played Capitan Vidal was like, I've never hated a character I've played more and been more fascinated by playing a character.
yeah, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, he has to do brutally violent things to everybody that he
The
encounters.
scene, oh my god, fucking scene where he's like sewing his lip shut.
Yeah, I
Oh
know. Yeah, after
god.
Mercedes shot, I know, I was like, "I wanna know how they did that." I'm
Oh,
assuming
I'll
it's like
tell
a
you.
prosthetic. Oh, cool, tell me.
I'll tell you. So it is a prosthetic. It's these very thin flaps of silicone that are
Mhm.
quite close to the actor's real skin.
I was gonna say, I was like, "It doesn't look like anything is
It
bulky on top of it," so I'm like, "That guy had to be careful."
it was this very thin prosthetic.
Mhm.
They painted blue on his actual cheek to photo it
Oh.
out,
Oh,
right?
that
Like
makes sense,
on the
okay.
interior
Mhm.
wedge. And then he has a big ass needle and
Mhm.
is sewing the prosthetic on, and everybody was like, "That dude has, like, balls of steel." Like, I would not be able to, because it is so thin. Like,
Yeah,
that is
right next.
so close to his skin, and also, the lip of what is actually silicone is, like,
Mhm.
a quarter of a centimeter. Like, it's not like he has, like,
Whoa.
a big margin for error, you know?
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
I know, is
Talk
that
about
fucking wild?
talk about muscle control, Jesus.
I know, I know. I was like,
Man.
"Bro, are you kidding me right now?"
Should we talk about some of the fairy tale elements
I
that
would love to talk about some of the fairy tale elements.
Woo!
Woo, motherfuckers! Let's talk about a fairy tale.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, give me what you've got. I feel like you as a reader of fantasy and fairy tale novels,
ugh,
even more than me, and I read a lot too, but you know a
yeah,
lot about all the various
it's
elements and maybe whatever. Like, yeah, I'm curious to know more about, especially at the mandrake root and some of the other. Yeah. Anyway, tell me about
yeah.
tell me about the fairy tale elements that you connected with.
Oh man, I mean all of them, let's get real. But story structure wise, right, very much a fairy tale. Like a little girl, right, who's
I,
interested in the fairies, whatever.
I
But
know.
the stick bugs that when you first see the fairy, it's like a
Hmm.
crazy looking stick bug
Yeah.
kind of thing. That's like massive.
Yeah.
Um and one of the things that I love about fae creatures, fairies, whatever, is kind of their ability to like morph or change or like adapt
Hmm.
to their surroundings. And
Yeah.
so this thing that you are like, it's a bug kind of, but it maybe is a fairy, but I don't know. When
Yeah.
Ophelia shows the stick creature a picture of a fairy, like in a fairy book, what we would think of, right? Like a humanoid form with wings and little,
Yeah.
the bug creature like and like realigns itself to look like a fairy, and I'm like, that's so fucking sick.
Yeah.
Also
I know.
because it's like the fairies need to be kind of under the radar, right? And it wouldn't look under the radar if they were going around looking like a little humanoid with wings. It is very under the radar if they look like a bug.
Yeah. I love that when Ophelia first encounters them, when she gets to that sort of like stone monument thing, she sees that creature and calls it a fairy. Like she knows
Yeah.
it's a fairy before she even has the visual of it being that way. I thought that was a cool
Yes.
little detail of like, oh, she knows, she has an intuitive sense. She's a kid, so she's seeing it that way, you know.
Yes, exactly. And obviously the evil stepfather, the sick mother, like there's those kinds
Mhm.
of things too. Also, the 3 is always very important in myth
Mhm.
and fantasy and storytelling and fairy tales, and so, like, she has 3 tasks that she has to complete
Yeah.
before
What
we
are
can
they?
go back to
It's
Sword.
get the key.
Get the
Um,
key,
get the
get
what does she get for the
get
blind man?
the knife.
She uses the key to open a thing that gets the knife. Yeah.
Yep, and then it's bringing her brother to the
Right.
labyrinth and killing him, spilling his
And
blood
is the mandrake
with
root
the
is
knife.
something that the fawn gives to keep the brother alive. That's
The
different.
mandrake root is something different, and the
Mhm.
mandrake root is very much a part of a lot of Western, and Eastern European folk tales and folklore. It's
Mhm.
often called, the root that dreamed of being a man. The
Mm.
there's
Because of the way it looks?
yes, because it mandrake roots kind of grow and look a little like humans, like, they kind of have a torso and little arms and kinda little
Mhm.
legs.
Yeah.
Um,
That
there's
scene where she puts it in the milk and it turns into a baby, I was like, "Oh, I forgot about that," and I was like, "That's so
dude,
fucking sick."
do you wanna know another fun behind the scenes thing?
Always.
Okay, so they initially did that scene, with, like, a potato with
Mhm.
with markers on it,
Yeah.
and they were gonna do a CGI mandrake because they had a mechanical mandrake that would, like,
Oh, interesting, yeah.
and
A
they had
puppet.
one they had a puppet, and they had one that was a puppet, but it didn't have any it it would stay in place, like, it had a wire maquette under it, but it wasn't
You could
mechanized.
pose it, yeah,
You
mhm.
could pose it. And so they did that scene with the potato because they knew, like, okay, she's gonna have to put it down and then it moves.
Yeah.
And then they did another one that was just for lighting reference with the non-mechanized one.
Yeah, yeah, with the posable one, that makes sense.
Yes, with the posable one. And Guillermo del Toro was like, "That's such a better take." Like,
Y right,
that's a
yeah, because
better
they can see it, they're not acting to a potato, they're acting to a mandrake root.
exactly. Exactly. It was like the eyeline is better, like the everything about this is better. And so they had to go in and roto out the mandrake, the physical
Oh,
mandrake,
oh, man, yeah, and replace it and
and
whew!
replace it without like in it because it didn't have markers on it
Yeah, because it
or
was a lighting
anything.
reference, they were
And so
only
it's just
planning
a
to use
lighting
it.
reference. They weren't
Oh,
thinking
man.
they're gonna use that, and I was just like, "Fuck, fuck, dude."
That's what
But
it's
and
like working with GDT.
but the kind of one of the myths of the mandrake root, it's the root that dreamed of being a man. There's the
Mhm.
myth of it screaming when you harvest it, so you have to, like, do
Oh,
all these
what?
rituals, and, like, if you
Uh-huh.
hear the scream of a mandrake root, you'll die. Um,
Oh, whoa.
Guillermo del Toro's version of the mandrake root myth is fucking horrifying, and that is that mandrake roots come from the gallows, and that when a man is hanged, he would ejaculate, and that ejaculate would fall on the ground and make mandrake root, and I was like, GDT, WTF.
Where
I'm
did you
sorry.
where did he say this?
He
What?
said this in one of the
He's like,
uh
"Personal theory I have."
it's the behind the scenes that is about 30 minutes long. That's in English because there's one behind the scenes that's all in Spanish that I watched. There's one that's this Warner Brothers thing that's about 8 minutes. And then there's this behind the scenes that's like 29 or 30 minutes. That's in
Yeah.
English.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, and I was just like, the fuck? That's never a
Whoa.
thing I've heard. That is
Yeah.
never a thing I've heard. Um,
Wow, crazy.
but it's But again, that's like that is mandrake roots have long been a source of, magic, ritual,
Mhm.
folklore, fairy tales, etc. And so kind of having that and feeding it blood, like putting it in milk, feeding it blood, again, strong fairy tale elements of those.
Yeah.
It's the same as like having things done in threes and whatever, and like
Yeah.
the sacrifices and this kind of like ancient prophecy, ancient lore. It's so, so amazing to see Guillermo del Toro take all of those references, like every
Mhm.
reference that he has read and, imbibed
Yeah.
basically over his life up to that point, and put them in this packaging and in this like version that still reads exactly like a fairy tale, even though you've
Mhm.
never heard this version before. Uh,
Totally.
it's awesome, and I think for people that are fans and students of these sort of myth, folktale tropes and things, it's incredibly satisfying, and it only gets more
Mhm.
satisfying every time I watch this movie because I'm like, "Fuck, it's so good." It's just
I
so good.
I agree. There's so many elements thrown in of the real world and the fairy tale world. In fact, before we break out of our movie discussion portion of the podcast, I kind of wanted to round it out by talking briefly about just Ophelia's story and
Mm.
basically the question of like, did it happen or didn't it happen? Like, was this real or is it something that she is creating in her
Mhm.
imagination, you know? Um, I think it's really interesting what Guillermo does, Del Toro does to show what she sees and show what other people see, you know? Um, because much like a lot of fairy tale movies, the the stuff that Ophelia goes through, like we don't see, the adults don't witness it.
Right.
It is interesting though that like the only like they do kind of make it somewhat explicit, I guess, that before, like at the very end of the movie when Ophelia is saving her baby brother, first from Capitan Vidal, and second by refusing to give it over to the fawn to sacrifice the baby, even for just a few drops of blood, as he says, like saving her brother and refusing to do that. Capitan Vidal finds her in the labyrinth
Yeah.
and sees the scene playing out with her talking to the fawn, and from his perspective, the fawn isn't there.
Yeah.
Um, so that's like a specific shot in the movie, making it clear like Capitan Vidal does not see this thing, this
Right.
particular adult. And it's an interesting choice that he is the only one to kind of witness any of Ophelia's, like, the thing that she's experiencing. He's one of the
Mhm.
only people to kind of bear witness to his perspective of it, you know? Um, like her mother hears the tales of I saw a fawn, and Mercedes is like, I saw fairies, and they told me Mandrake
Yeah.
and all this stuff. But they never actually explicitly see her interacting. They're just kind of like, oh, kid stuff, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's fascinating, and because and I mean, I don't know, like it I don't think it ultimately matters whether or not it's real because it's real to Ophelia. And but it is interesting, like the pieces of how they introduce it to you. Like I love that the fawn gives her a book, like,
Mhm.
clearly she comes into the movie with, like, a bunch of fairy tale books that are the things
Yeah.
that she reads, that she loves and give her comfort, and then he gives her a big book and says this after he tells her, "You're the princess, you need to complete these tasks and these challenges and prove yourself worthy of being immortal to come back
Yeah.
to the underground realm." And he gives her a book, but the pages are blank, and as things happen, as and kind of as traumatic things happen, the book starts filling itself in. And in a
Yeah.
way, it's like, to me, I take that as being Ophelia creating a story that makes sense out of her situation,
Mhm.
using her imagination to create this other world that in her brain makes sense of what she's going through.
Right.
Um, I think, and I don't know, like, and at the end, Capitan Vidal takes the baby and shoots Ophelia, killing her. Tragedy, right?
Yeah.
But it's in what Ophelia believes to be true that since to her, what has been happening ostensibly in her imagination is true to her, then her afterlife, her experience of the afterlife is the story she told herself.
Mhm.
And I think, I I don't know. I think the jury is out as to whether or not what happened to her is real or it's an imagination thing. But I think that something that, and I don't want to like explain it too much because I do think, like Guillermo del Toro said, there's like part of the magic of this movie is some of the things that you can't explain because that's sort of where magic gets its
Yeah.
power. But I think too that like she is like it gets to this theme of like we all create our own reality, you
Mhm.
know? She creates hers to deal with these traumatic events of like not having her father, and the whole point of becoming coming back to the underground realm as the princess
Right.
of the fairy kingdom is that she'll or is that her father lives down there and she'll see her
Yep.
father again, and then
Yeah.
ultimately she'll see her mother again after what happens to her mom after her mom passes. um Capitan Vidal is also living in a world where he's telling him that self this story of like what it means to be a leader in the society that he's a part
Yeah.
of. And there's just all of these examples of like people creating the reality that they live in by telling themselves the story that gives them a sense of purpose. Like Capitan Vidal could give up on his father and be like, this old bastard like did a lot of horrible things and gave me this
Right.
watch as a reminder, as a way to punish me, to
Right.
kind of like
Right.
instill this sense of whatever. But he doesn't. He chooses to hold on to this metaphorical piece of his father and believe that story, and that becomes who he is. And Ophelia chooses to believe that she is a princess and that by completing these tasks, she will be released from this kind of world of struggles and turmoil of people and war and fighting and death and torture, essentially. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Like I come down as like maybe it's real, maybe it isn't. I think that there is plenty of evidence to say that it isn't really real. It's the active imagination of a child coming up with something. But I also think that the movie might be saying that it doesn't really matter if it's real in the real world. It matters that it's real to Ophelia. And she is actually creating that, like, the worlds in our own minds can be real and they can have power, because ultimately it's the story, the tale that Ophelia has weaved brings her to the conclusion that, like, I have a choice to make. I have a choice to become part of this kingdom, but I have to give up my brother, my baby brother, a person I don't
Mhm.
know, just a blob of a kid that I don't
Yeah.
really have much of a connection with besides that it was my mom's kid, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but she chooses not to sacrifice innocence to
Mm.
get a thing that she wants. And in doing that, she proves, even though she dies, she has the moral high ground over Capitan Vidal and really anybody in the story, you know?
Mm.
And I think that, I don't know. I think it's an interesting, again, trying not to over explain it because I think that's where the real power of the storytelling comes in, is like that sort of essence of like who Ophelia is and who she chooses to be from the story that she creates for herself. But there's there's something very deep there, and I obviously resonate with it a lot.
Yeah. I personally, I don't think it matters if it's real or not because
Hmm.
it is real to Ophelia.
Right.
I think that, and that is part of what Guillermo del Toro is trying to get at. It don't be concerned with the practical realities of, is this real? Is it not real? Are the fairies there? Is the fun real? Because it's real to her, and that experience has a real impact on her. And that is what's important, is that it's having an impact on her. It's having, it is changing her life, her perception, her whatever.
Yeah. And
But
the people
yeah,
who
I
are
agree. And the people that are around her and interacting with her, but I think ultimately, like, however you choose, however your brain chooses to cooperate, and interact with the world sometimes, like, maybe it's not real to everybody else, but, you know, it doesn't mean that the experience of it isn't real to you
Yeah.
individually.
And also the people who are the most concerned with like objective reality, like Capitan Vidal and his cronies, like keeping their boots clean, keeping the clocks running, keeping the house in
Yeah.
order. Like those people are assholes.
Yeah, they're fucking dicks, like, why
They
would I
have
wanna be part
no
of
they
that?
have no imagination outside of being able to keep control over the environment that they see and being and having this kind of objective reality stance about things and keeping things in order is just a way to keep control over something,
Mhm.
life, which you cannot ultimately control that
No,
way. And
no.
Ophelia has a much more robust connection to nature and imagination and seeing it as this thing that is alive and can interact with her and can give her something that she needs, something to
Yeah,
contextualize all of the crazy shit that she's going through.
yeah, because like, she's not doing great, you know? She's gotta do something.
That's
Anyway,
true. Let's take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we will share our thoughts and takeaways on Pan's Labyrinth.
this week's pod is brought to you by our sponsor, Opt Out, a subscription based news service for the modern age. Opt Out is like many other news sites that you know and love, but with one simple twist. Isn't it annoying that you have to choose which news topics you want to hear about? Opt Out takes a slightly different tactic. Simply log onto your account, view a screen of hundreds of hair raising, traumatic current event subjects, and simply choose which ones you want to opt out of. Don't care for tariffs and the associated economic windfall of their implementation? Tariffs? More like terrific day not to be hearing about them. Opt out of that subject matter. Tired of being updated every moment about international political turmoil? Discomfort no more. Opt out. Too much irritating and uncomfortable news of women and children getting gunned down by fascist regimes? We've got a solution for that. Simply opt out. For the low price of $14.99 a month, you too can slowly opt out of every major current event topic that could bring you even a modicum of discomfort or unpleasant feelings. After a month of careful curation, you will be opening up the Opt Out News app to only get stories of a man in Minnesota planting soybeans.
Sounds
Included
nice.
it sounds so nice. Included with your subscription is Opt Out Puzzles, an app full of entertaining distractions carefully designed not to make you upset or make you think too hard. Try the latest game, Four Squares. It's just four squares on a screen, and once you've tapped them all, you win. Opt Out Puzzles gives you that sweet, sweet dopamine hit without effort or hard work. So come try Opt Out today and start ignoring the news you want to. And I've got to say, Opt Out, what a hell of a sponsor that we have. So many people are already using it. It's really a revolutionary service.
Mhm.
Um, and I just, I think,
Don't let
yeah,
the algorithm decide what you don't hear.
you
Let
decide.
yourself side what you don't hear.
You decide what you don't hear. You have to actively say, I'm opting out of that. And that is
Mhm.
empowering.
It is. That's empowerment for the 21st century, if you ask me.
Yeah. So try Opt Out News today. Thanks,
This
Opt
very
Out.
Yeah, thanks for being our
We
very real sponsor this week.
we opt in to opting out.
All right. Y'all ready for this?
Lots of takeaways. All right.
And we're back with Brother Sibling Movie, talking thoughts and takeaways. So, Mare,
Yeah.
we have prepared some statements about our
Yeah.
thoughts on Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
Would you like to share yours?
Yeah.
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 Right. That's
Okay.
done.
What? That. Okay, so I've already mentioned this article, but a couple of things in here are going to be from the same. All right. So, in a 2020 interview for Warner Brothers, Del Toro said of Pan's Labyrinth, I feel that this movie will connect long term. Some people will love it. I had that certainty. I feel that when a movie connects that deep, there is an element of that you cannot explain. Del Toro knows his films are not for everyone, and that's perfectly fine with him. His aesthetic, his vision, his love of the macabre make him the storyteller that he is. With Pan's Labyrinth, Del Toro invites us into that most special part of an artist's heart, the part that has the courage to say, I created the world I want to live in. Do you want to see it?
Mhm.
Blending the world of fairies and ogres with the rise of an authoritarian regime may seem apocryphal or atonal. After all, what do right wing nationalists have to do with chasing will o wisps into the woods? To Del Toro, they represent the same malevolence. Whether it's a giant frog growing fat on bugs while the tree it lives in dies, or military forces hell bent on building a quote unquote better country while simultaneously killing their fellow Spaniards, it doesn't matter. The message of this film and the message of so many fairy tales is that we all encounter evil, be it fantastical or fascistic, and it is up to us to decide how we rise to the challenge. Many people decry Pan's Labyrinth for not having enough fantasy elements. And I get it. I'll never complain about seeing more fairies in a movie. But I would argue that there are plenty of fantasy elements in this film. The fantasy of politics, the fantasy of power, the fantasy of government. As Del Toro says, geography, religion, gender, these are a lot of things that we construct to operate as a society, but they are not real. If you look at geography, it isn't real. There's no lines delineating the US and Mexico. It's just earth and water. The fact that we accept those boundaries, they're inventions, they're fantasy. Just because you think something is a fantasy doesn't mean that it can't impact your life in tangible ways. And I think that because of the world that Del Toro has created with Pan's Labyrinth, it shows a very real and very tangible way that these things do impact us, that fantasies do impact our lives. And this certainly impacts me every time I watch it. End of statement.
Well said. I couldn't agree more, but I will agree in a slightly different way.
And you are going to now give your own statement prepared by the author.
Prepared statement. Pan's Labyrinth is a punk rock fairy tale, a rallying cry for the oppressed, a tragedy about childhood in wartime. Guillermo del Toro refuses to pull any punches with this film, taking the Spielbergian edict of never harm the children and throwing it in the garbage. The horrors of this world will inevitably affect children the most. Even if they can't explain what's wrong, they will always know that something isn't right. If fairy tales are a method for children to begin to accept the harsh realities of this life, Pan's Labyrinth takes as its subject matter the harshest of harsh realities, what it is like to live through the horrors of war. Deftly switching between the story of conflict between Franco's totalitarian regime and the communist rebels fighting them, with the story of Ophelia, a young girl trying to make sense out of her own situation, Guillermo del Toro weaves a thread of context to understand that the fight for freedom is as important as the fight for the liberation of the self. Ophelia either witnesses or creates an elaborate world of fairies, fauns, gigantic frogs, and monsters, mirroring and making sense of the confusing adult world she encounters. Whether or not what Ophelia witnesses is real or not is besides the point. Ophelia is witnessing something that helps her contextualize the traumatic things that she is going through, and As it is true for all the characters in this movie, you create your own reality and the choices you make in this life. When fascism is on the rise globally, we need to look back at stories like Pan's Labyrinth as a reminder of what this kind of rigid, clockwork, angry mentality begets. It murders women and children. It seeks to extinguish the light of hope, creativity, and imagination. The tragedy of Ophelia is that the wondrous story she imagines to make sense of her world will never be witnessed or seen by anyone else except her. That is the nature of oppression. It snubs out the possibilities of human potential. Thank God that Guillermo del Toro found Ophelia's tale and had the bravery to share it with all of us.
Fuck
End
yeah.
statement.
Fuck yeah. Fuck fascism. Fuck fascism. It does nothing but hurt people. It does nothing but hurt people.
Goddamn right.
God damn.
Tambok na siksi. Tambok na siksi.
Vibe check. It's time for a vibe check. Let's do a goddamn vibe check.
Vibe check. Time for a vibe check.
Um,
What'd you think of the vibes, Mayor?
oh man. All right. So for those of you who may be listening for the very first time, first of all, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for listening. Evan and I do not rate films on like a star system, number system, anything. We rate films on two
Fuck that.
things. Fuck that. Fuck you, Paul. Fuck you,
Yeah,
Paul.
Paul. 1
Yeah,
out of
fuck
10.
you. 1 out of 10, bitch. We're not like Paul. We're better than
No,
Paul. We're
that's
better than
right.
Paul. We
Yeah.
rate movies on two things and two things only, which is how is the story and how are the vibes. Um, to me, I love this story. I think it's incredible. I think it's beautiful. It is poignant. It is moving. It is as relevant now as it ever will be.
Hmm.
Um, it is beautiful. I definitely am somebody that believes in in the power of telling stories and the power of learning from our past and the power of learning from history. And if we do not tell these types of stories, if we do not allow these types of stories to exist, we are not able to learn and grow. And the active suppression of these types of stories and these types of tellings is what fascists do. And that
Hmm.
is never going to be okay because reality may be subjective, but pain and suffering are never objective. Or never subjective, right? Like those are things that happen. Like these
Hmm.
atrocities happened, and we cannot sugarcoat that, and we cannot ignore that. Um,
Hmm.
and I think in the way that so many great fairy tales give a window into the horrors of the world. We've talked about this with all the movies in this season.
Hmm.
That fairy tales give an accessible way to talk about the horrors of the world and learn something from them. And I think that is a story that is always going to be worth telling, and it is always going to be worth telling these types of stories insofar as yeah, war does nothing but destroy. It leads to nothing but like chaos, destruction, pain, and suffering, primarily for the most vulnerable in society. Um,
Hmm.
and those are the kinds of stories that we need more of, especially in the deft and amazing hands of someone like Guillermo del Toro, who has a great deal of empathy and compassion, as well as just contextual understanding of these kinds of stories. Um, and in terms of the vibes, like the vibes are fucking sick. The vibes are fucking thick as shit in this movie. It's fucking awesome, start to finish. Um, yes, it is very violent. The vibes are definitely like fascism, violence, horrible shit, oppression, and also like crazy fairies that are really scary and like really like horrifying. It's sick as shit. I love the vibes of this movie. I love the vibe of all Guillermo del Toro movies. Um, I think if this is the type of vibe you are, if
Vibing
this is
with.
your frequency, if this is your frequency, fucking lock in. It's awesome.
Yeah, I dig these vibes. Great story, great vibes. You know,
Sorry, gay vibes.
it's macabre, it's creepy, it's scary. Um, just like it's goopy, just like life is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. You know.
Goopy.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think
That's how I
about
usually describe
what
day to
came out of the
day.
frog. You know,
Ugh, yeah, so fucking gross.
so good.
So
Yeah,
gross. I loved
I can't
it.
get enough of these vibes, you know? Like I imagine I like to imagine Guillermo just sitting in his little rainy room writing these things, or somewhere up on a mountain with like dark clouds looming over him,
I
and
just
coming and creating these worlds, and I just love it. So thanks GDT for the good vibes.
thanks GDT for the good vibes. And I would say like the important vibes, you know?
Yeah.
I think these are
Mhm.
important vibes to have in this world right
It's
now.
easy.
So
It's easy for people to ignore the bad feelings, the things that make you uncomfortable and squeamish. But if you lean into them a little bit, I think there's a lot to be learned there.
there's so much to be learned because you can't I am definitely a big believer in like you cannot appreciate all of the beautiful things in life, like community and acceptance and love and respect and the natural world. You can't appreciate all of those things if you don't also have an appreciation of how fragile they can be and
Hmm.
how easy it is for people with a fucking god complex to come in and ruin everything with cruelty and malice.
Yeah, so true. So fuck those people,
And
and
fuck you, Paul.
yeah, and not fuck Pan's Labyrinth. Celebrate Pan's
Yes, Pan's
Labyrinth.
Labyrinth. Yes,
El
Pan's Labyrinth.
laberinto del pan. No,
Del
el laberinto
fauno.
del fauno.
Del
Yeah.
fauno. All right,
I
I
like
love
that
it.
in the movie they don't actually call him Pan. That's just like,
No,
well, Western Americans might only know this guy as like Pan. It's like he's just the fun. I
he's
like
just the
that.
fun. He's just the fun. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, well, look at this. An episode I'll remember we recorded.
Hooray!
Hooray! I love it. This was great. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I cannot wait to go to
Me
sleep.
too.
Um,
You deserved it.
I deserve it. Let's see here. Evan, do you want to tell
Yes.
people where the good people can find you in linea, as they say in Espanol?
Thanks for bringing the Spanish language into this podcast
Sí,
about a Spanish language film. Yes,
sí,
the good
yo hablo español.
good
Muy bien.
job. That's definitely how you say that. Yeah, the good people can find me on the socials as Art of Evan K. K is just the letter. That's Instagram and probably a Facebook page. And you can check out my website, artofevank.com. And I'm also on LetterBoxd, Evan Kerna, Koehne. And don't forget to check our Letterboxd out too, BSM Pod.
Yes. Love that. You can get in touch with us at brothersiblingmovie@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you have to say. You
Please tell us.
can, please tell us, you can watch our YouTube videos of these episodes on YouTube at Brother Sibling Movie. We're also on Instagram at Brother Sibling Movie.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
and that's it. Oh, you can find me online too, kind of, if you want to. It's not
If you really work hard for it.
if you like are super, I say like send a raven. That's usually the better way to get in touch with me. But if you wanted to
Mhm.
find me on Instagram, you could find me at Lawn Daddy Lives Here on Instagram with underscores
Hell
between the
yeah.
words. And other than that, we will see you next week with another fantastic revisionist fairy tale that I can't wait to talk to you about. Um,
Yeah.
And yeah, it'll be great. That's it. That's all I got, my friend.
I'm looking forward to it. This is so much fun.
So fun.
Let's yeah. Let's go get lost in the labyrinth. And hey, Mare, I got something for you.
What?
Go watch a movie with your sibling.
Oh my god, hey Evan. You know, it's so funny. I was gonna tell you, go watch a movie with your sibling.
You know what? I will. It sounds like a jovial good time.
It does. Especially if it's a drinking game.
Yes.
I love it. All right. I love you. I'll talk
I
to
love you too.
you
Next week.
later.